Welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Kennedy, and I'm here to help you become the very best version of yourself. What's up, guys? Welcome back to this week's episode of the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. Today is a solo round. I'm in the studio here with Kane. Usually I do my solo ones at home, which you guys would have probably heard me say on those solo episodes. But we're in the studio today. Thought I'd come in, have a chat with Kane. We're going to go through a bit of a Q&A today. I had a few ideas about stuff that I wanted to chat about in this episode, but I think it'd be more valuable and more beneficial for you guys if we go through a bit of a Q&A. It's been a while since I've done one, and particularly in the studio as well. So if you guys enjoy this format, like we're going to try and do some more solo stuff moving forward, where maybe once or twice a month I'll come in the actual studio and do some of the solo episodes, because you guys seem to enjoy them. The feedback, the downloads and everything are quite good when it's just me on my own, which is nice. So if you have any specific style or format that you want us to really follow through with on these episodes, let us know. Obviously, we've got a fair idea of what we want to do, and hopefully you guys enjoy them, get a lot out of them. And we're always open to answering questions and stuff on the show. So we might even look at setting up some form of structure where you guys can even send in some voice messages where you're asking questions and we'll play them on the show. But yeah, we'll kind of get stuck in. A bunch of questions to go through, ranging from training, nutrition, mindset, business, a bunch of different stuff that you guys send in via Instagram. So thanks to everyone who did send those questions in. And we'll dive in. Kane.
Righto, Danny, first question's been sent in. What is the purpose of a mini cut and how would you execute it?
Okay, so a mini cut, the structure of a mini cut is very different to a regular calorie deficit. So firstly, when would you even use a mini cut? To be honest, there's a few different times where I would implement a mini cut with a client or myself. If you're going through a long period of a gaining phase, where you've been in a surplus for some period of time and you don't intend on stopping that surplus anytime soon, inevitably you're going to gain a bit of body fat throughout that process. And so a mini cut can be a great way to almost reset, bring your body fat back down without losing muscle mass, without affecting your metabolism, before then transitioning back into your surplus again. Obviously, the other time where we would implement one of these is if you've got super late notice and you want to get much leaner than what you are at the moment in a really short period of time. Obviously, with most calorie deficits and fat loss phases, my recommendation is that we want to pretty much make it as long as possible, which is not what people want to hear, but the longer it takes you to lose fat, the more likely it is that you'll retain muscle mass, your metabolism's not going to suffer, and the process is much more enjoyable because you don't have to go as aggressive. Now, with a mini cut, it's the exact opposite. So typically, the time frame of a mini cut could be anywhere from, say, 2 weeks up to a maximum, I would say, of 6 weeks. Usually the sweet spot is between 2 to 4 weeks. And so in this period of time, the objective, so the goal, is to drop as much fat as possible in as short a period of time as possible. And so that's why it's very different to a regular deficit, because we're going to have to go a lot more aggressive with the calorie intake. So let's say you've been gaining muscle mass and you're in a surplus and you're eating 3,000 calories a day. For a mini cut or for a regular deficit, we would gradually drop those calories down, like very gradually over time, to make sure that we're not losing muscle mass. But because it's only a short period of time in this mini cut phase, we can go a lot more aggressive. So we might go from 3,000 all the way down to 2,000. So you drop in 1,000 calories from your daily intake, which is a total of 7,000 for a week, which is a lot. But again, the purpose is to kind of get in and out as quick as possible. So protein stays high. We're in this deficit. We're trying to obviously retain muscle mass and muscle tissue from our strength training. We may even throw in some extra energy output from cardio or increase the volume of our training as well. Again, the purpose is I want to drop as much fat as I can in as short a period of time as possible so that I'm not damaging my metabolism, so I'm not losing muscle tissue. And these can be a really effective tool. As I said, a long-term gaining phase just to bring your body fat back down. Otherwise, if you kind of have an event or something that comes up out of nowhere and you're not in great shape and you don't have time to go through a deficit properly, a mini cut can be a really great way to bring your body fat down.
Okay, Danny, next question. How long should you stay in a deficit for?
So the duration of your deficit will vary depending on how much fat you've got to lose and also how effective the fat loss phase actually is. So the first and most obvious answer is when you feel like you're happy with your current body fat percentage. So if I'm in a deficit, I don't want to get to the end of it and think to myself, oh, fuck, like I wish I was a bit leaner, or I wish I had have lost a bit more fat. It's obviously not the goal. We haven't completed the objective or whatever. And so in terms of ratios, I think this is the thing that's probably more beneficial for people, is that I see it all the time that people are just in a constant deficit. So you're basically in a deficit year round, and you're wanting to lose body fat, you're wanting to build muscle, you're trying to do everything at once, and you, as a result, you end up getting fucking none of it done. And so the longer we stay in a calorie deficit, you have to keep in mind the more you are going to affect your metabolism and most likely lose muscle mass as well. And also it just fucking sucks if you're in a deficit all the time. And so I would typically structure a calorie deficit through a period of time from, like, let's say 12 weeks all the way up to potentially even 24 weeks. However, it depends on how much fat we want to lose. And so when you look at the ratio of time in a deficit in comparison to a surplus in a gaining phase, you almost want it to be like a 2-to-1 ratio, potentially even a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning that if I'm in a deficit for 3 months, then I want to then transition into maintenance or in a calorie surplus and actually build for 3 times the amount of that. And so in the span of a year, I might be in a deficit for 3 months, and then the rest of the year I'm at maintenance or in a surplus. However, to be honest, like, most people don't really follow that approach, obviously. And so it depends on if you're working towards a specific date and also what's actually happening throughout that deficit. And so the way we can really break it up, because I think that's important. If I'm going to be in a deficit for, let's say, 20 weeks or 16 weeks even, there'll be periods throughout that where I'll implement certain strategies to make sure that my metabolism is not suffering too much to the point where I'm on super low calories, doing a lot of training and not seeing much of a result. And so I always start people eating as much as possible and training as little as possible, meaning that you're only in a slight deficit and your training is at a point where we have heaps of room to move in terms of adding more energy output in. Now, if it's been 12 weeks, you're in a deficit, you're still not where you want to be, and you want to extend it, it's worth throwing in things like a diet break, which pretty much all you're doing is just increasing your intake to maintenance or slightly above for a week or two, to give your metabolism and your body a bit of a break before then going back into a deficit. However, this is why it's super important at the beginning of a fat loss phase to actually decide what you want, because people don't put a great deal of thought to the outcome that they're trying to achieve. So then how do you know whether you've achieved it or not? Or how do you know when the time is, when you get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm going to transition out of this and reverse diet out into a gaining phase or whatever. And so if you get really clear on that and you know exactly what body fat percentage you want to be, you might have a target weight goal, which is not always super effective, but it can be. Or just the visuals of how lean you want to get. And if you're mapping that out to the point where on week one, you know that, okay, if I'm in this deficit, on average, I'm probably going to be dropping this much per week or per month. And so that allows me X amount of time to kind of get to my desired outcome, then that's probably the smartest way to go about it. So you're removing the guesswork and you're making it super predictable, because again, we don't want to be in a deficit all the time. And I mentioned before, people constantly dieting like year round, and your physique just won't change. If anything, it'll get worse because your metabolism is suffering. Your training most likely is not getting better. The chances of you gaining muscle tissue is slim to none because you've been in a deficit for so long and you're probably not overloading. And even if you are, your body just does not have enough of a surplus of energy, or it doesn't have a surplus at all in regards to recovering and repairing and actually building new lean muscle tissue. So very long-winded answer, but it kind of is person to person, meaning like, are you happy with how you look? If you are, then that's a really good sign that it's time to start to build your calorie intake up. And I believe there's a question about this in today's episode anyway, but getting to the point where you're reverse dieting out of that deficit so that you're not gaining a heap of body fat, if any at all, and you're gradually building your calorie intake up, which is essential, because when we have these these phases where you go from deficit to a surplus or at least maintenance, what you're really doing is you're making the next deficit easier. And so if I finish my deficit, and as I said, I think there's a question about this, so I might even just throw it in now. Like at the back end of a calorie deficit, if I've started my fat loss phase at the 3,000 mark, like we said before, and I might finish my calorie deficit at, let's say, 2,000 calories. So I'm a lot lower in my daily intake than what I was at the beginning. I can't just go, oh yeah, fuck, I'm pretty stoked with how I look. I'm just going to start eating 3,000 calories again, because your body is not ready for that. Like you won't be able to handle that much amount of food in comparison to what you've had. And so you'll gain body fat. In a short period of time, you'll feel shit about it. You'll then go back into a deficit and the whole fucking cycle starts again. And so at the back end of your deficit, when you feel like you're pretty happy with how you're looking, you've achieved the goal, it's then time to plan the next block, which is the reverse diet. And it doesn't have to be slow. It can be quite quick, but what we're doing is the opposite of how we got there. So if I finish at 2,000, what I'm trying to do is get to maintenance kind of as quick as possible. And so that might mean, okay, week one after the deficit, I might go from 2,000 calories a day and I might bump that up to say 22, 23, maybe even 2,400 calories a day. And so it's a pretty big jump. However, it's very likely that we're still in a calorie deficit because your energy output's going to go up, your mood's going to be better, recovery will be better. And so we're still in this negative energy balance where we are eating more, but we're just in a smaller deficit. And because we're feeling better and expending more energy, you're most likely going to lose even more fat. And so in this kind of month period after your deficit, we're just trying to build food up gradually to the point where your body weight plateaus or stalls and your hunger levels drop, your training improves, your recovery is getting better, and we're at a point where our weight stabilizes, if not slightly increases a little bit. So then we're putting our body in a position to gain quality muscle tissue, which, you know, it's your best opportunity to gain muscle at the back end of a fat loss phase when you're super lean and your body is just ready to absorb nutrients, and your training, as I said, will improve. And the best part about all this is that you're getting to a point where you're eating a fuckload more food than what you finished on, but not looking much different. As in, you're still super lean, you'll be a lot fuller, energy will be better, training improves, you start to build a bit of muscle tissue, and your body, like, you look phenomenal. Like, a lot of people will find a month after their deficit, they probably feel like they look better than what they did at the end of their deficit. And so the outcome from all of this is that as I gradually increase my food, because once you've reversed out of that deficit, gradually you're going to keep having to increase food every time you hit a plateau with training or body weight or muscle tissue. And so by the time I get to my next deficit, which should be a decent amount of time after that, as I said before, my starting point should be higher. And so when I used to compete, like, I remember it got to the point where I was consuming between 4.5 to all the way up to 6,000 calories a day and not really gaining much weight, meaning that when I started my diet or my deficit, I was dropping fat eating like 4,000 calories a day, which is wild to think about. But that doesn't just happen by accident. It happened because every time I was in a gaining phase, I would gradually keep pushing food up to the point where I wasn't gaining weight and eating a shitload of food. So to go in a deficit, it doesn't mean I go all the way back to the 2,000 mark. It means that I just drop some calories from where I've finished at. And so the goal or the ideal outcome is that the next time you go to lose fat, you can do it eating more food. So this whole cycle is super important. Otherwise, as I said before, it's like you're on a fucking treadmill. You're just going absolutely nowhere. You're working really hard, but you're not really going anywhere. Your physique doesn't look different. The experience is shit. And you got to then ask yourself the question, well, like, what's the point of all this? Like, what am I trying to achieve? If it's just to look semi-lean year round, then go for it. But if you want to see an improvement, which we should, like, every gaining phase in comparison to a deficit, your physique should look better if you've improved, which is why it's so important in a gaining phase to prioritize consistency and progress. Because if you don't, because people usually relax throughout a gaining phase, because you're eating more, motivation probably drops a little bit because you're not seeing your body change as much. And so we kind of half-ass nutrition, half-ass training, and then you're like, oh, I want to lose some fat. And you lose the fat and you fucking look the same. And so in in a sense, kind of just wasted a big chunk of time. So that whole process is super important.
Yeah, nice. I think you've just answered the fat loss phase question in that. I'll jump to this next one that someone sent in. What supplement should I be using for fat loss?
Okay, this is a good question. I'll start it off by saying that there really are no supplements that you need to lose fat. And that should be at the bottom of your priority list. And that's obviously being completely transparent, considering we have our own supplement company. I'd love for you guys to purchase our products. But it's just the truth. Like, we need to look at what the highest priority variables are for fat loss. The first one, quite clearly, being your calorie deficit. So if your nutrition's not aligned, like, supplements are going to do fuck all. Secondly, training, very, very much the same. Like, if I'm not training effectively, then I'm not going to then go worry about what supplements I'm using when I'm not even doing everything I could be doing, first of all, to see results in the first place. And so by no means am I saying that you shouldn't use supplements for fat loss or when you're in a fat loss phase. All I'm saying is, before we get to this conversation, you need to look at all the other variables. Are you in a calorie deficit? Are you training effectively? Are you prioritizing your sleep and recovery? Are you hydrating well enough? Once all these boxes are ticked, now we look at the supplements, because as the name would suggest, they're there to supplement your training and your nutrition and all the other variables. So from there, I would say, first off, the two most effective supplements that you can be using would be creatine monohydrate and some form of protein powder or protein supplement, whether it's a whey protein isolate, whether it's a plant-based protein, whatever your preference is. The protein being so important purely because it's just easy to reach your protein target for the day. Like, there's no such thing as like a fat loss protein or even like a muscle growth protein. You want to look at a protein supplement as a convenient way of consuming your protein. So instead of having a big meal after you train or while you're on the go, it's obviously much easier to have a supplement. So we should be aiming for around, at minimum 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight per day, which can be difficult to get from food, which is why a protein supplement is so convenient. Like, I'd say on average 2 scoops of protein a day, usually one with my oats in the morning for breakfast and then another shake later in the day between meals, just to help me reach my protein minimum. So a protein powder becomes a very effective supplement for fat loss in a sense, just because it's making the target or the goal of reaching my protein intake a hell of a lot easier. Creatine monohydrate, I recommend absolutely everyone listening to this podcast to use creatine every single day. So we want to be having around 3 to 5 grams of protein of creatine monohydrate, every single day. And I often get asked a lot when you should use it. The answer to that is just whenever. Like, you're not going to notice an acute response from having creatine. So if I just drink our pre-workout right now and I'm sitting here recording this podcast, like, my heart rate's probably going to be up a little bit, my focus and mood, like, everything's going to be elevated a little bit because it's a stimulant. Creatine, not the same. Like, our body produces creatine naturally. All we're doing by supplementing with it is increasing the amount we have stored in the body. And so that usually takes around a week to bring those levels up in comparison to what they are naturally. And we can obviously get it from food as well. But the thing it's going to help you with are the number of things, right? It's going to help you retain muscle mass, or if not, build muscle mass as well. It's going to help with cognitive ability as well. So brain health, endurance, strength. There's a number of factors or a number of variables that creatine really helps. And I think it's a no-brainer. It's one of the cheapest supplements out there, one of the most studied and researched supplements out there, and it's extremely effective. Those two are probably the highest priority supplements that you would want to be having throughout any phase, but particularly fat loss. From there, I'm a big fan of a pre-workout supplement purely because whether it's a placebo or not, which obviously scientifically it's not placebo, but if you've been using them for a while, it may not be as effective as someone who's just started using a pre-workout or doesn't have as much caffeine. But if you're using a supplement that's going to allow you to go in and train more effectively or improve your performance, it's obviously an effective supplement. And so the pre-workout, I think, is a great supplement to use. It's going to increase your output, make it increasingly more likely that you will retain muscle mass or build muscle mass and strength throughout a fat loss phase. if you are aware of what certain markers in your body are, like through blood tests, such as like vitamin D and things like that, I supplement with a vitamin D tablet every single day. So I have a 10,000 IU of vitamin D every single day. What else do I use? What else would I recommend? To be honest, they're like the key supplements that I would prioritize, to be honest, or a multivitamin if you're not getting enough of those vitamins and minerals from your food. Then you look at what you can almost refer to as like a luxury supplement. Okay, and so branched chain amino acids, we haven't actually put an specific amino acid supplement as part of our Unify range, because I personally just don't think it's as effective as what it's made out to be, and it is one of those luxury supplements. You can be using a daily greens powder in order to help you get in those minerals and get your greens in if you're not someone who eats a lot of vegetables or fruits or whatever. That can be quite effective as well. And outside of that, guys, I think the biggest thing, like I mentioned before, is prioritize the other variables first. So once they're all aligned and you're doing all the right things, the supplements will help. To an extent, they will help. The other one worth noting just before we wrap up this question is fat burner supplements. There really is, in my opinion, and there's research to show that there's a very, very small percent of likelihood that this can happen, but there's not a great deal of supplements at all, or if any, to be honest, that actually burn fat by you consuming them. What fat burners are doing is they are increasing your energy output, because you're going to go and increase your movement or your exercise after using them, elevating your heart rate, which is then going to help increase your metabolism, which expends more energy. Yes, we can use certain supplements that help metabolize fat as well, or they may suppress your appetite, which is what a lot of fat burners do. But it's not like I'm drinking this fat burner and as I sit here, I'm getting leaner. Like, fuck, if it was that easy, everyone would be fucking shredded year round. So again, it's just a way of saying, just be selective with what you're using and why you're using them. Like, don't get sucked into the hype that supplements are going to do the job for you. That is not. They're just there to supplement all the other things that you should be doing first. Then they can be a really, really great help in order to make the process smoother, more enjoyable, and more effective.
Yeah, nice. We'll move on to warming up. This person's written in, what's an effective warm-up before you lift?
Effective warm-ups before you lift. Over the years, I've seen so many different philosophies or styles around warming up. The most common one you would see is people coming into the gym, maybe doing some static stretching, jumping on a treadmill or fucking cross trainer or a bike or something, and spending a few minutes on there to get the blood flow, like promote some blood flow and everything, warm up the body. But in my opinion, you want to look at what you're there for. If I'm going to the gym and I'm doing a lower body day, I might be doing some squats, some form of unilateral movement, some deadlifts or whatever. My priority is to make sure that by the time I start my first set, my body is primed and ready to go to start whatever that exercise is. And so a lot of the time, to be honest, the best warm-up you can do is the movement you're about to do. So if I'm about to squat, I'll actually preface that by saying I think doing some form of mobility first is a good idea, particularly if you're spending time sitting down like I am at the moment. Most people sit down a lot throughout the day, so hip flexors are going to be tight. So spending a short period of time doing some mobility, maybe some myofascial release with like a foam roller or a spiky ball, hip flexor release with a kettlebell handle or something like that, just for a short period of time. Like I see some people come in and take some fucking 30 minutes to warm up. Like it does not take, you don't need to spend that amount of time in order to be ready to train. So your warm-up should realistically take no longer than 5, maximum 10 minutes. So some mobility. Then in terms of like activation work, I used to, look, I'll be honest, I used to do a lot myself and with my clients with a lot of bands and stuff like that to activate the glutes and all this shit. But to an extent, that can be effective if you're really feeling you've got that mind-muscle connection and you're firing those muscles up. But the best way to activate and warm up the muscles you want to use is to actually use them. So if I've got a squat after my mobility, I'll go and squat body weight first. I'll get to the depth that I want to be at. I'll spend some time in the bottom range of that depth. I'll then get the barbell, an empty barbell, and work through the squat range and practice the movement pattern that I'm about to do. Same with something like a bench press. For pull-ups, I might even do a couple of sets of lat pull-down first just to move through the movement that I'm actually about to do. So your warm-up shouldn't take too long at all. Mobility first. There's no real need to be doing any form of static stretching. You might do a little bit of dynamic stretching to, again, just promote better mobility, and then start practicing the movement you're about to do. And from that point onwards, you realistically shouldn't need to do much else warming up. So you'll see people in the gym before every exercise they do for the whole session doing like warm-up sets first. If I'm going and doing, let's say, an upper body push day, and I've done bench press first, I don't need to fucking warm up before I do an incline dumbbell press. I've just spent 3 or 4 or 5 sets, whatever it is, using the muscle I'm about to use, doing the exact same movement. So your warm-up happens at the start. And again, a very long answer to a pretty simple question. Do the movement that you're about to do. Like, move through that range and get comfortable in the position you need to be in order to effectively do that movement. Because the difference between having the mobility and having the range and feeling confident in the actual movement pattern of an exercise such as like a squat or a deadlift, the difference between being able to be in the right position and not be in the right position, or to feel the muscles that you're working and not feel them, can be the difference between results. As I said earlier in this episode, like I see so many people doing certain exercises, and this also brings up the whole point of prioritizing, quality reps over quantity. Like, your form and your technique and intent of every rep should be exceptional before you worry about adding weight. So Dr. Mike Israetel, who has been on this podcast before, and I would say he's probably one of the more renowned and respected hypertrophy coaches in the world. He put up a video on YouTube with Chris Williamson, I think it was. And they were training, and Mike said something that really stuck with me, and it really plays into the quality over quantity. He said, we're not here to count reps. We're here to do the perfect rep over and over again. So all we're here to do is focus on doing the perfect rep and then repeat that process. And I've said this in podcasts before. You guys will be shocked at how much better your progress, how much better your gains, or even fat loss, how much more effective all this is by literally just becoming way more intentional about every single rep that you're doing. Like, if I'm just moving the weight from A to B, that's nowhere near as effective as having the mind-muscle connection and focusing on the cues and getting the most out of every single rep. And so we're not there to do, like, if I've got a set of 12, like, how often do you see people, and I'm guilty of this at certain points, and I'm sure you are as well, how often do you see people just do 10 reps really shit and then put in a lot of effort for the last 2? And now imagine if you had have just done, let's say, 5 reps or 6 reps and did every single one of those reps really intentional, and the actual muscle fibers are working harder. So you're expending more energy, getting more muscle breakdown as well to help promote muscle growth. So the outcome is just significantly better. Also reducing the risk of injury, and it becomes easier to overload your training when you're doing it properly. So if you find like certain movements at the moment, you're at a point where you're kind of stuck, you can't progress from the weight that you're on, strip it back and really prioritize technique and form on every single rep, and start at a lighter weight and rebuild your way back up. And you'll find that the effectiveness of training like that, you'll be able to get away with lifting way less weight than what you're using at the moment. And now you have way more room for improvement and growth moving forward.
Yeah, nice. Moving out of the health and fitness space into a little bit of the mindfulness stuff, can you give this person an example of using the law of attraction?
Okay. An example of using the law of attraction. Now, I did a full kind of episode. It was a bit of a brain dump, to be honest, in the most recent episode about the law of attraction and manifesting and the mistakes and all this type of stuff. I like to think of everything really as simple as possible and in a really digestible way where it just makes a lot of sense, and it's not too broken down to the point where you're like, that scene, that fucking meme or the scene in movies where it's like all that, like someone's brain is just going fucking nuts and there's like maths everywhere or the screen and you just can't even read it. I think that's what people feel about law of attraction a lot. And again, there's also a lot of people who probably question law of attraction. All I'll say is that you would never question the law of gravity, right? And the law of attraction falls within the same laws, universal laws of the universe. And so we have all used the law of attraction time and time again throughout our life, regardless of whether you've done it intentionally or not. And so the best way I can explain this is when we place our intention and our attention on something, whatever it is, it typically expands. So where we place our attention or our energy, whatever that is, will expand. And I've mentioned a number of times in its most basic form, like what we focus on, we will typically experience more of it. And we can all think of examples of this. And this obviously also falls under the law of vibration too. Whether it's thinking about the fact you haven't spoken to someone for a period of time and then you get a text from them, or you bump into them the next time you leave the house. Whether it's sitting down, years and years and years before an outcome even happens and getting so clear on what it is that you want and just having a desire and having a belief that you can do it and just doing everything in your power to put yourself in a position for it to happen, and then it happens. Okay, so an example of the law of attraction, I'm going to give you guys two, and they're both relatively personal. First one is my beautiful fiance, Danielle. Now, I didn't just go out and start looking for a fiance. I didn't go like, oh, fuck, I'm gonna go and find a fiance today and then just look around and try and find one. Quite clearly, I didn't do that. However, I had a desire to attract someone who was someone that I could love, someone that loved me, someone that I could spend my life with, that I genuinely just felt connected to and was on the same frequency as them. Now, Danielle, when her and I first met, there was no intention of, even from the first few months, to be honest, 6 months even, there was no intention of meeting her because I wanted to make her my partner. I'd placed that intention. I knew that I wanted that. I had the focus on me just having trust that would happen. Again, like I said, I didn't force it. I trusted that I would find the right person. And everyone can use this example for themselves. If you're not in a relationship, or even if you are, you probably can think back to when you met your partner, and it's exactly this. You weren't expecting it. You wanted it. You had a desire for it. You did everything you could do to align yourself, to put yourself in a position to even attract or meet this type of person. And it just happens. It's like a synchronicity. If you think back now to even how you met them. So as I said in the last episode, the steps are get clear on what it is that you want, right? Get really clear on what it is that you want. And I highly encourage every single person when they're going through that process to let go of all the limitations. Let go of what everyone else in your family has done, or what people around you are doing, or what seems within reach, or what seems logical or reasonable. Like, fuck all that. What do you truly want? What completely lights you up? The perfect outcome, even if it doesn't make sense and you don't know how to do it. That's the first thing. Like, I obviously didn't know how to go and attract a fucking fiance. But I wanted to be able to experience that feeling, that experience. Law of vibration kind of comes into play here. You're both on the same frequency. Danielle and I met. Everything just felt normal, right? It felt normal because we were on that same frequency. And in time, even when we got together and we started seeing each other, I didn't say to myself, okay, on this date, I'm going to ask her to marry me. It just happened. Everything felt so good, and I had this intention of what I wanted to experience at some point in my life, like whether it's getting engaged and getting married, whether it's having kids, whatever it may be. And in time, I started to put those steps in place. So I started to align myself with how I could get to that outcome. I didn't say it had to be this specific date. I didn't try and force it. It just kind of happened. And even, we'll even say from the perspective of buying the ring and stuff, like I didn't have it all mapped out. I didn't go, okay, this is how much I'm going to spend. This is how I'm going to do it. This is how long it's going to take. This is what it's going to look like. It all just kind of happened. And then you get to this point where it's like, fuck, how did this happen? That's usually a good sign of manifesting or attracting what it is you want. You trust and you believe it's going to happen. You don't force it, and all of a sudden this perfect outcome feels like it just shows up. It's not a coincidence. It's a synchronicity, like I said in the last episode. The second one, which I think is probably an even better example of this, like not better, like trust. If Danielle, if you're listening, you're beautiful and you're perfect. This example will make a lot of sense for you guys. I had an intention of purchasing the exact car that I've got right now for years. Like, I think it was around 2017 that I first kind of saw one, and I was like, man, that's fucking mad. It didn't seem within reach whatsoever. I didn't know how the fuck it was going to happen. I didn't know when it was going to happen, but I knew at some point in time that I would have that car. And throughout, from 2017 until January 27th, I think it was this year when I purchased it, I would have, certain pictures on my laptop or background on my phone, or every time I would see one, it'd bring up some form of emotion in me. When I would set my intentions for the year, or for 6 months in advance, or for years in advance, I would write that down to the point where I was writing down the exact color, the specifications of the car, everything. I had every detail. I knew exactly what it was that I want, but I wasn't forcing it. Now, I also talk about how you need to align yourself with the version of you that it would make sense to even have the outcome. So when I first thought about, how good it would be to have it, I wasn't in a position to get it at all. And so over those years, it was really about me creating the best version of myself, which has fucking nothing to do with the car. It was doing the personal development, improving my self-worth, my confidence, my self-image, whatever. It was gradually improving my business and starting to develop as a business owner as well. It was the type of people I would surround myself with. It was normalizing these type of things. Like, I'm very fortunate within my network to be able to, and I've done this intentionally, like networking with people who are doing incredible things. So these intentions that you want that once weren't normal start to feel more normal. And so it got to the start of January. Danielle and I were at home, and we just randomly decided to go to this car yard like near our house. And we get there, first car we see when we walk in is the exact one that I've always wanted. And so I asked the dude, can I grab the keys, check out this car? I wanted to show Danielle. I sat in it, turned it on, fucking was obviously in love with it. I was like, this is insane, so nice. At this point, there's no part of my brain that's going, okay, well, how can I do this? Is it going to work? None of that shit. We leave there, and when I went in there, I tried to walk into that car yard. I had no intention of getting anything, but I walked in as if like it was normal. It was like as if I was there to buy a car, which I wasn't. But anyway, get home, cut a very long story short, I ended up purchasing this car like a week or two later, and I hadn't had it all figured out. I didn't have this perfect strategy of how I was going to do it. All I knew is that I wanted it. I had a desire to have it. I believed that it was going to happen at some point in time. I didn't try and force it. And I aligned myself with the type of person who would be in a position to even have it. And then before you know it, now I've got it. And so that's just one simple example with a material item. But I know I've kind of answered that in a very long way, that simple question again. However, hopefully that's kind of given some insight to how this works. And you can use it for anything. Okay, that's the thing. We don't need to know the how. We don't need to know the when. We have to be really clear on the what. You have to strongly believe that it's going to happen. Even if you don't know how, even if it doesn't seem like it's going to happen now. Like, you can look at guys like Kobe Bryant when he was alive, guys like MJ, like LeBron, like these obviously all basketballers, but I can guarantee every single one of them spent so much time in like visualizing themselves in a position they're in now. Even down to the point of like mentally rehearsing like plays in a game when they're taking the last shot, and the experience of what it would feel like when that ball goes in, and hearing the crowd go nuts, or being, putting the ring on their finger when they win a championship. Like, these things don't just happen by accident. It's because someone has set the intention, they've aligned themselves with it, and they've trusted that it's going to happen. They've known before they even got into the NBA. Like, Kobe would have known before he even got into the NBA that he was going to become the player that he became, because he truly believed it without having to know when or how it was going to happen. Like, he had the belief that was going to happen. So hopefully that's a bit of insight that makes somewhat sense.
Yeah, nice. You touched on your work a little bit there and some business. How do you deal with setbacks and failures in business or life, this person asks?
Well, the answer to this is that I didn't used to deal with them well at all. In some way, I feel in a lot of a way, I feel very grateful for early on in life. I just had a heap of setbacks and failures, like way more than the average person. And I was extremely committed to achieving the success with these things, and just continued to fall short, continued to get cut from teams, like, all of the above, right? And so I experienced a lot of failure and setbacks early. And for whatever reason, I kind of, every time that happened, I doubled down and just went even harder, and it didn't really faze me too much. If you go, fast forward a few years down the track, there's obviously other type of failures that aren't like sport. So business stuff or finances or relationships, whatever it may be. But once I stumbled upon a lot of this self-improvement, personal development stuff, I looked back and really asked myself the question, like all of these worst case scenarios or setbacks and failures that seemed devastating at the time, were they that bad? And then when I look back with perspective, 99% of them were the best things that have happened for me. And that's the switch we need to make. It's like things don't happen to you, they happen for you. And more often than not, it's really hard to see that in the moment. You know, when you're disappointed or when things haven't gone the way you thought they were going to, it feels disappointing. And it's hard to just sit here and go, oh, well, this is great. This is for the best. Like, this is the best thing that's ever happened. But everything does happen for a reason. And when you can make that mental shift in regards to a failure, like I say a lot now, that if I switch out the word failure with attempt, it's like, okay, this business didn't work out. That's attempt number one. It's not a failure. Like, we can take lessons from every failure or setback. And the difference between people who allow a setback or failure to literally determine what happens next, or we allow it to define us, and the people who don't allow that to happen are the ones who can look at these setbacks and failures and not let it deter their level of motivation or drive to achieve what they set out to achieve. And so I can look at something that doesn't work out and go, okay, what worked well here? Like, what are the good things from this situation, and what can I take away from this that's positive? Okay, what are the things that I could have done better or I could change next time so that this doesn't happen again? And when we think about the law of polarity, the law of polarity states that to every positive, there's a negative. To every up, there's a down. And so even in your moments of your lowest frequency, your biggest disappointments, frustration, sadness, whatever, there's always something in that exact moment that is the exact opposite. The law of polarity states there's always to every reaction, there's an opposite reaction, or whatever it states, right? Basically meaning that there is a positive in every situation, no matter how hard it is to see in that moment. And so by looking at these failures as attempts, but at the same time, changing your perspective, ask yourself the question, okay, in a week, in a month, in a year, in 10 years, will this matter? And if the answer is no, then it shouldn't matter now. So you really need to get clear on the fact that, like, okay, if this failed and I really care about this thing and it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, why? Like, what can I take from this, and what is this trying to tell me, and what can I do next? Like, what's my next move in order to make this part of the story? It's all just part of the story. Like, I think by now, if you've been listening to this show for a while too, most people know that success or achievements in certain things is almost never linear. And so we can also go, okay, well, maybe I should remove the expectation and like let go of the judgment of expecting things to go the way that I think they should. When you put it that way, it's pretty fucking crazy to think that, like, oh, I know how everything should go. And if it doesn't go the way that I thought it was going to go, then I have a right to be pissed off because I'm the one who gets to decide. Like, that's just not how fucking life works. So you either let it define you and you let that thing turn into the next thing. Like, if our focus, as I said at the start, like what we focus on, we experience more of. So if I'm focused on all the things I don't like or the things that I didn't want to happen, and that's where my energy and attention goes, then I can almost guarantee that I'm going to attract more of that in alignment with that feeling or that experience. And so dealing with them, it's taking a lesson from it, moving on as quickly as possible and focus on whatever the next action is. Sit around and fucking feel sorry for yourself. Like, what benefit does that have? Absolutely none. And so that's why it's super important to be able to take something away from it and learn from it. So you either win or you learn. As simple as that.
Very good. This person asks you, okay, picture this, Danny. Someone has come to you wanting advice on quitting their job and to go all in with their side hustle. What does Danny Kennedy tell them?
Well, I'll say this firstly. Actually, I hope this person's listening. I have had a handful of examples where, and one sticks out in particular, right, where a certain person that I have trained who works for someone else that I train has quit their job because of listening to this podcast and gone somewhere else. And so firstly, I apologize to the boss, but not really, because you should never do what you don't feel happy doing. And so to answer the actual question, the first part of this, I think it's important to say, is that if you are in a position at the moment where you are unhappy, you have to realize that you're the only one that can change it. And it's not up to anyone else to change it. For some unknown reason, people spend a massive period of their life doing shit that they don't want to do, just because that's what everyone else does, or that's how you think things have to go, or that's how your family did it, or that's how your friends are doing it. That is not the case at all. Like, if you're finding yourself in a job that you genuinely just don't like, it is up to you to change that scenario and do something different. Now, to answer this question, obviously, if you have a great job or a secure job where you're making good money and the thing that you want to do is not making you any money yet, or is not set up properly, it's not very feasible to just go, okay, cool, I'm going to hand in my resignation and then just start this. I'm going to go and start a YouTube channel and not make money at all. Like, that is not exactly a great decision majority of the time. However, this is where we use the whole embodiment thing, like I mentioned around the law of attraction before. You have to ask yourself, okay, if I was to go all in with the thing that I am passionate about, so you've got this corporate job or whatever, and you've got an idea of what you would prefer to do. And I've actually got a client of mine at the moment, which I'm super stoked with. She has a very great job in marketing and in a corporate gig. And she's now basically transitioning to something completely different, like in a completely different industry. And she's been doing this other job for a long period of time. And so she's following what she's actually passionate about, but she didn't just quit straight away. You know, even when I think of my old man, like one of the proudest things, proudest experiences or moments, or however you want to look at it, for me is like my old man showing me that you can just change what you're doing whenever. Like, it's never too late to go all in with whatever it is that you want. You know, Dad, I can't remember how old he was when he did it, but he had his own plastering business for 30 years or whatever, and then just always wanted to be a cop from when he was younger and just never did it, and then decided, fuck it, like, I'm going to do it now. And he did, and never been happier, and all the rest of it. But coming back to what I was saying, we need to look at, okay, how can I embody the version of myself that it would make sense that I could have this outcome? So let's say it's the whole YouTube thing, right? This is a very random one, and I'm sure most people's dream is not that, but if it is, I'm in a corporate job and I decide I want to become a full-time YouTuber. Well, that's not going to just happen by accident, is it? So you've got to look at, okay, well, let me embody the version of me that is a full-time YouTuber. And so that might look like, and this applies for any other type of passion or fulfillment thing that you want to chase and follow. Start looking at where you can allocate time, even with your current job, into putting that time into building this side hustle or this passion project or whatever it is that you can get to a position where you can transition across. And so our experience of life is literally just like a mirror. And so if I'm not putting out any energy or intention or actions that would make sense for me to have the outcome, it's not just going to happen. So the whole YouTube thing, I'm a big fan of using like Google Calendar app in my phone to schedule everything for the day, like from meal times to certain type of work tasks to training to time to do absolutely nothing to meditate, all this type of stuff. And so you get clear on where you're allocating all your time. And so if I've got a full-time job, I can go, okay, every morning or maybe every night, I'm going to allocate and schedule in time to spend on the thing that I want to do. And I'm going to show up to it as if it's already my job. I'm going to structure it as if it is my full-time job already, outside of actually doing your normal work. So if it's YouTube, it's like, okay, well, if I was a full-time YouTuber, how would I be? Like, what would my habits be? What type of content would I consume? Who would I surround myself with? What type of videos would I be putting out? How often would I be doing them? How would I feel about myself? How would I talk about myself? Like, all of these things that would be in alignment with you being a full-time YouTuber, you can start doing them now before it's even a thing. So I can embody that version of me now. And by gradually scheduling time, like I was saying this to an online client the other day who's building something at the moment, I said, until that happens, you have to show up and allocate and schedule time to put into this thing as if it's already a job, like it's not a choice. So, okay, between 5 and 7 a.m., I'm getting up and I'm working on this thing that I want to turn into the main thing as if it is my highest priority. And so you start working on it, you start building the structure, you start doing the work, and you start getting the reps in. Like that's all it is getting the reps in over and over and over again until you start to see some growth in it because you've been putting attention to it. Now, when it starts to get to the point where, you know, it is an actual feasible opportunity or option to make, then you can go all in. I think throughout that period, the one thing I will mention is if you are still working in another job, which is most likely the case at the start, you can't base your level of productivity or success for the day or for the week based off how much closer you are to being able to start the new thing, because that's not what you're spending most of your time doing. You've still got your job. So with your intentions for the day or with your markers of success or progress, when you're at your job, be completely present. As if you're trying to, even if you know that in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, you're going to leave the job, show up and be as best as you fucking possibly can at that job, because all of those traits and that energy will carry across to the other thing you're doing as well. And the more time we put into it, the more it becomes an opportunity and you can start to see how it's going to work. Then at some point in time, you've got to take that risk. Like there is always going to be some form of risk involved in it. And so you've just got to have that level of conviction around the fact that this is going to happen. Like I said before, with the whole law of attraction thing, it's like I've placed the intention, I've aligned myself with it, I'm putting all my time and energy into it, I'm trusting that it's going to work. And if it's a financial thing, you have to figure out whether you're okay with the fact that, okay, maybe I am making less money, but I'm doing something that I love, which allows me to show up a better version of me every day, which is most likely going to result in much better growth of this new thing anyway. So hopefully that makes sense. Obviously, there's a number of different examples that you can throw in and insert there instead of being a YouTuber or whatever. But the important bit is that if you treat it like a side hustle, it will be a fucking side hustle until you start treating it like the main thing. And although you can't put in all of your time into it, you can still show up as if it is the highest priority and structure it as if you're already doing it full time, because it's not going to happen by accident. You have to embody that version of you first before the outcome shows up.
So Danny, to finish off this Q&A, what's the most effective thing you've learned from personal development?
I'm going to go with two. The first one being very much aligned with the whole law of vibration idea that we attract what we kind of put out, meaning like where I'm placing my attention and intention, like the frequency that I'm vibrating at, I will attract more things, people, places, outcomes, feelings, thoughts, whatever, in alignment with that. And so in a very basic way of looking at it, it's like, okay, what am I thinking about? Like every thought we have is an invitation to attract. And so where am I spending my attention and my time? Like, am I putting it into the things that make me feel good, into what I want to attract, or am I putting all of my time and energy into shit that makes me unhappy, or thinking about things that I don't like, or talking about things and people that I don't like or don't want? That is not going to give you the outcome you want. You have to put all of your energy and attention into where you're trying to go, not what you're trying to get away from. The second one is just that the whole personal development, self-improvement thing is, in my opinion, it's just a process of elimination. It's not always going to be about what you need to add in to change or improve your circumstance. It's what can I eliminate and remove? Like, what are the habits that aren't in alignment with the version that I'm saying I want to be? What are the people that are no longer serving, you know, their purpose, or they're not really helping me move closer to where I want to go? What time am I putting, like where am I spending most of my time? Which again is why it's important to have, you know, a schedule, or at least look where you're putting your time throughout the day. What are the environments that I'm in that aren't serving any purpose or aren't aligned with the best version of you? It's just like almost doing a big stock take on yourself, removing the limiting beliefs, removing the things that aren't in alignment, removing all the bad habits, the people that shouldn't be there, the environment, all of this stuff. Like once you let go of all that stuff, you realize, oh fuck, like I actually feel pretty good. And now I've got the energetic and time capacity to be able to do the things I know I need to do, or I feel better, and now I'm starting to track these opportunities or people or whatever it may be. And it's not because you went and added some shit in or found out like the secret that no one knows about. It's the fact that you just stopped doing all the shit that was getting in the way. And so I think the big thing, and this is what I've found a lot of the time for myself, is that you need to get out of your own way. If you're the thing that's in the way, then no one else is going to be able to change that. Like you're the only one who can make a difference with that. And so when you think of it like a process of elimination, you don't spend all this time searching and hoping that you find this answer to this thing that obviously successful people know and you don't. Like, it's none of that shit. It's like, okay, well, if I looked at myself now, or if I was looking at someone else and they were doing everything that I'm doing, would I look at them and say, okay, it makes sense that you would attract the thing that you're saying you want? Because if it doesn't, or if it just doesn't align to you being the best version of you or feeling good about yourself or feeling good about life or whatever, then again, it's up to you to change it. And you're the only one that can do that. And so I think, yeah, one of those biggest takeaways is the fact that personal development is a process of elimination. That's us. Beautiful. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed that Q&A. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you still stuck around all the way to the end of the episode, I really appreciate it. Very grateful. If you haven't subscribed to the show already, please do. Obviously, we have a shitload of episodes and there's something there for absolutely everyone. And hopefully today, as I said, you took some value away from these questions and answers. I want to do more of these. We're going to keep playing around with the format of these solo episodes. But Kane, thanks for jumping in today. Really appreciate it, brother. And thank you guys. I will chat to you again very soon on the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast.